I want to say thank you, Courtney, and it was, Latasha that introduced me, so.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is Latasha Redhouse with the Intertribal Agriculture Council. We also have Courtney on the call as well. Just a little bit about the Intertribal Agriculture Council. Oh, there goes a little one. We help Native American producers and Alaska Native producers enter the international marketplace. And part of our initiative is to provide educational resources. And so this webinar is resiliency agriculture that was launched just this month. So without further ado, to pass the mic to Naveen so she can share some information about her organization and how.
Definitely. Hi everyone, my name is Naveen Zaid and I work for the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service Office. I'm based in Ottawa, but we have 3 posts within Canada. As I said, I work in Ottawa. I have a marketing specialist colleague who is based in Toronto, and we have a new office that we just opened in Montreal. So we cover the marketing portfolio in our office, and we work with U.S. Companies and trade associations to promote U.S. products and commodities in the Canadian market. We are always happy to provide assistance to you through our state regional trade groups and through trade associations like the Intertribal Agricultural Council, with information about the Canadian market, with export assistance programs, and we're always here to answer any question you might have about the Canadian market.
Great, thank you so much, Naveen. Before I go into introducing our guest speaker today, I just wanted to let everyone that that is tuning in to, if you do have any questions, feel free to insert those questions in the chat box or the Q&A box. So we'll go ahead and revisit that towards the tail end of the presentation. So today, our guest speaker, and we're super excited to have him join us today.
Hey Lottie, you cut out a tiny bit. This is Courtney Fisher with the American Indian Foods Program. I would just like to continue the introduction for Robert. We have today Robert Mortensen, the Managing Director of REM Limited, and he's going to talk about doing business and the mechanics of business in Canada. So without further ado, Robert, if you'd like to begin.
Awesome, thanks Courtney. So hi everyone, thank you so much for having me on today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background on myself. So I've been in the industry for the past 25 years, working in the packaged goods industry in Canada. And my passion is helping entrepreneurs and natural products companies build their brands in this great country up north. You can see a shot on that cover page of Moraine Lake in Alberta. Such a beautiful country here, and I know you guys have checked out some of the companies that are on the call, and I think you guys live in some equally beautiful places in North America. But I just wanted to thank you guys for having me on the call. So let's look at the next slide, which is a little bit of background on my company. So I'm a strategic growth advisor. As I mentioned, I'm focused in on the consumer products industry, and I spent the first 15 years of my career working in more of the conventional consumer products side of the business, and I shifted my focus to natural foods about 12 years ago. What I do is I help companies, namely founders, CEOs, develop and execute their go-to-market strategies for Canada, and I've managed to work with some amazing brands over those 12 years. I typically help about 10 companies a year. Some of the companies I've got listed here on the slide, one of them is Boulder Brands, which some of you might have heard about, a great company that recently got bought out of Boulder, Colorado. Their sales, when I started working with them, we were working on around 700,000 in annual sales with that business. And over the course of 8 years, we managed to grow the business to 50 million in Canada. So I wanted to give you a perspective. Although Canada is a smaller population than the US, there's some significant opportunity here to help you develop your brands internationally as you look to expand across the border. Fiasco is another one. It was a regional brand out west, around 3 million in sales. In over 24 months, I helped that company to achieve 10 million in sales. The next couple of companies, the one that looks like a bit of a house there is Greenhouse. And within 16 months, they went from 0 sales to a run rate of 3 million in Canada. And then the fourth one we'll talk about is Bobo's. So some of you might be familiar with Bobo's Oat Bars out of Boulder, Colorado. They're a bar company that came into the marketplace. And right now we're trending towards 1 million in sales. And they only launched, I would say, about 2 years ago, 18 months ago. It's a very competitive category in the bar section here in Canada. And then you can see some of the other companies that I've worked with below. So really excited to help companies develop their brands up here north of the border. So today's discussion is, I want to focus in on 3 big buckets. The first one is to give you an overview of the Canadian market. And I wanted to drill into the competitive retail landscape. So there are several similarities between the US and Canada, but there are some significant differences, and a lot of those do lie in and around the area of the landscape. So I want to take you through that, and then I want to slow it down a bit and go through some of the mechanics of doing business in Canada. So, some of you, I think, are ready to come into the marketplace, and others are thinking about it. So I just wanted to share with you some of the important aspects, and I think especially considering some of the products that I've seen with the group that's on the call today, you've got some really strong, unique selling propositions, and I think they'll resonate very well here in Canada. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about distributors and brokers and some of the strategies that you could be thinking about. Who are these players? Why are they important? How come in Canada, people recommend having both a distributor and a broker? So some differences there versus the US. And then I'll round it out by talking about some common practices of doing business in Canada with retailers that in many cases might be very similar to what you're doing today in the US market, but in others it might be different. So I want to share that with you. So let's start off with a very quick introduction to Canada. So I've worked with many US brands, and Canada typically is that first country that companies think about as they look to expand internationally. Canada has a large $96 billion food and beverage market. So it's growing at around 3%, and it's got a very well-established and still much upside to go in terms of the health and wellness segment of grocery. Natural organic as a market represents $6 billion in sales, and it's growing at a double-digit clip. It's one of the top ranked markets globally for organic products, especially. We do have, I would consider a very well-developed health and wellness consumer. We do index higher on some categories, and I gave you an example. Boulder Brands was really the first big company to come out on the gluten-free stage. And gluten-free in Canada was trending at about 2x per capita consumption versus the US. So there are some pretty big opportunities here with certain categories that do better in this market than they might in the US. So something to think about. But one point I want to really stress, and again, having worked with many US companies, there's a tendency for companies to consider Canada as a simple extension of their US market plans. I would advise against that because we are very unique in certain areas, which I'll share with you today. So if you're treating Canada simply as an extended region, I think it's important that you understand that you do need a go-to-market plan, a very, the more comprehensive, the better, in terms of, I think, plugging in effectively within the industry here in this marketplace. Okay, so before we get into the landscape slides, I wanted to just make a note on COVID, because I think we're all struggling with the pandemic globally. So on the next slide, I've got a recap. I just wanted to put it together a quick one-pager. I don't want to spend too much time on this within the presentation. But as a company or as a country, we are struggling just as everyone else is globally with the pandemic. What I do want to share with the group is that our retail business is managing well through the crisis. At the initial outset, there was a big surge in demand, as I think many of you in your states felt as well, in and around certain categories. But that now has come under control as our retailers move from being in a reaction mode to much more of a recovery mode right now. Many of the major accounts have issued their quarterly results, and between Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro, every one of those major retailers have posted exceptionally strong growth. E-commerce, as a coincidence, has really jumped up. So right now it's got a 9% share of grocery. And in some of the next slides, you're going to see that e-commerce was very underdeveloped. So that's been a huge change here. But many retailers here in Canada, they do continue to review new products virtually. So business is open still in the marketplace. It is a little bit awkward. Samples are being sent to buyers' homes, and they're being sent to head office where the buyer's going to go and pick up those samples. So virtually, we're all conducting business. And it is going to, though, be some time before we get to a new normal. So I think it's going to be at least a year before we sort of see, maybe even a year and a half, 2 years before we sort of get back to what we were before. So on this slide that you're looking at, this is a snapshot. I think it's very similar to what the US snapshot would look like on a channel landscape. So some of the facts here are, this is through Nielsen data. You can see that the grocery channel is large at just over 60%. It's growing at about 1.8%. The next biggest channel for us, and this is all total grocery sales composite, the next biggest channel is club, and then we've got mass. So essentially club in Canada is Costco. We don't have a Sam's Club. We're much more focused in on Costco in this marketplace. And then mass market, number 3 is essentially Walmart. We did have another competitor here, but they ended up getting bought by Target. And then I think Target, many of you might know, came to Canada and they exited the market. E-commerce, as I mentioned, is significantly growing. So I had them reported at 1.5% share of the market, growing at a very strong 18.8% double-digit growth. Right now it's at 9%. So I think people's behaviors will change because of what's happened. And I think e-commerce has got to be, I think, an important part of any company's strategy as they're coming into Canada in the next 12 to 24 months. So let's drill down a little bit further from the channel. Let's look at who the retail players are. You can see on this slide, the first thing that hits you is, wow, Canada is a very concentrated market when it comes to the retail players. You can see we've got Loblaws, Sobeys, Costco, Walmart, Metro, those 5 accounts really having some very strong share in the marketplace. If you add up the top 3 retailers, it's actually 50% of this market. So the first thing you're going to think of is, oh, wow, this is pretty simple. Let me come into Canada. I'll just have to knock on 5 doors and I'll be in over 80% of the market. It's not that easy. These are very tough retailers to break into. And you're going to have a really strong selling proposition for them. But many of these retailers have multiple banners. So you might look at Loblaws as one account at 29.1% share. So a significant player here in Canada. Loblaws is a grocery retailer. The difference, I think, between the US is you're going to see that Walmart in the US is probably in the spot that Loblaws is in, whereas in Canada, Walmart only has a 12.3% share. So really the dominant player is Loblaws. Sobeys is another significant grocery retailer at 14.3% share. You can see Costco and Walmart are neck and neck. And then the third big retailer would be Metro at 9.9% share. So if you look at Costco and Walmart combined, it's about 25% of the market. The other at 16.7% takes into account a lot of the independents. And in that number would be included some of the natural and specialty stores that are across Canada, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next few slides. Okay, so what I thought would be useful was to drill into some of these retailers and give you some visuals in terms of who these retailers are. So we've already learned Loblaws is the #1 retailer. It's an interesting name. If you say it 3 times, you kind of wonder, wow, that's kind of a different name for a retailer. But they are the largest player. They're very strategic. A lot of smart people in that building just outside of Toronto here, their head office. They are definitely the market leader in grocery as well as in natural and organic. They have about 1,000 stores nationwide, so they are a national player. And 400 of those stores, roughly, are what we call their natural stores. It's called natural value. And I'm sure you're familiar with retailers like Kroger's, Albertson, many of those others, Winn-Dixie and whatnot across the US. In Canada with Loblaws, what they do with the natural store, and I've given you a few photos there to give you a bit of a look at their natural value section. It's a store within a store. So many of these locations are about 3,000 to 5,000 square feet within the overall bigger Loblaws banner. But they've got multiple banners, as I mentioned, and they have a discount and a market format. So, the discount stores are where price is really important. Assortment is very limited, but the market stores tend to have a lot more product offerings. It's sometimes a nicer shop where you can go in and see a lot of innovation on the store floor. But it's important to understand that dynamic with Loblaws as you're getting ready to go and present to them, is getting a really good understanding of, how do they go to market? What are their different banners and what are their different formats? The next player is Sobeys, as we mentioned. So Sobeys is the #2 player. Sobeys is also national, so they're in every region. They recently bought Safeway, which is not the same Safeway as the US. It's a Canadian division that was recently bought by Sobeys. They're a strong #2 player. They have just over 1,000 stores, of which 450 of their stores, very similar to Loblaws, have what's called Natural Source, which is their store within a store. And again, there are multiple banners at Sobeys. You've got discount banners, you've got more of your regular sort of major assortment banners that are under the Sobeys banner name. But again, multiple banners across Sobeys. And again, getting to understand what these banners represent, what their consumer base is going to be really important for you as you position your brands to the buyers. Okay, next slide is Metro. So Metro rounds out the top 3 grocery retailers. They're a central banner chain between Ontario, so the Ontario province, and the Quebec province. They have a really strong share within the marketplace for being not national. So they're in our biggest markets here in Canada, and their approach is a little bit different. They're integrating their natural products on the shelf within their respective categories. So I've got an idea here, a photo here of the healthy soup section that they've created within their overall soup segment. So you'll have Campbell's soup on the outside and some of the more conventional brands. And then where you've got in the healthy soup section here with their natural offerings, you'll see, Pacific and some of the other brands that are on the shelf, Amy's and whatnot. Their store count, around 550 stores, of which 200 carry natural products. Okay, so one big difference, again, between the US is Whole Foods is a significant player here in Canada within the independent segment on the natural front, but they only have 14 stores. They just, well, it's not just recently, but they launched in 2002. They are by far I would say the most significant natural player within Canada. There were plans to grow to 30 stores over the course of the next several years, but I know that Whole Foods ran into a little bit of trouble and Amazon recently purchasing them. I think they'll get back on track to growing their store count. A really great retailer for us to work with here in Canada. And they are really the trendsetters. Many of the other natural stores in Canada, so more of the independents, will watch and see what Whole Foods is doing. So if you're coming into the marketplace, getting Whole Foods to support you is still important. And I think it'll open the door for many brands as they look to get into Canada across those early adopter type of independent channel stores. Okay, so rounding out on the retail landscape, we've got independents, and they're the natural specialty stores. It's a very important channel for any companies coming into Canada. This is where your early adopters shop, and they're very important consumers because, you know, typically they're very vocal about the brands that they like. They'll spread by word of mouth. You know, that they've, you know, found this great new bar, you know, let's say it's Tonka. You'll get a lot of great benefit from going into this channel and nurturing this channel before you say, let's say you go into the chains. I would probably spend at least 6 to 12 months within this natural channel, just developing your go-to-market strategies, testing out your 4P propositions, like your pricing, your promotion plans. You know, are those the right promotions to run? Is that the right retail to be at? What's my assortment? You know, it would be beneficial from a cost standpoint to really work that out within this channel, because it's a more manageable channel in terms of listing fees. I think in the US you call it slotting. In this channel, it's relatively a low cost of entry. It's usually free goods, whether it's a full case or a half case or a quarter case. There are about 600 key A and B independents across Canada, and the A accounts represent about 30% of the total stores. So about 190 of those are A accounts, but there's about 1,000 stores total that comprise this segment. So really important segment of the market for the audience to understand as you develop your plans to come into country. Okay, so just going back to the condensed nature or the very highly concentrated retail market environment, this is a look at some of the banners across that Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro account base. You can see we've got many different banners here. Each one of these banners really requires you to customize your business development strategy as you prepare to present to the buyers. They're going to want to know that you understand how they go to market with their retail banners. So, you know, if you go into Loblaws, having an understanding of who are Loblaws banners. So you've got Loblaws, you've got Probigo under their banner, you've got Maxi, you've got Extra Foods, Real Canadian Superstore. On the converse side with Sobeys, you know, you've got Sobeys, you've also got Rochelle Berry and IGA. Those are some of the banners under Sobeys. And then Metro, you've got Metro, Adonis, Food Basics. So don't, you know, be deceived. You know, it's easy to bang on a couple of doors here and get your products listed. You just want to make sure that you understand how do these retailers go to market and how does your brand dovetail with what some of these buyers' needs are in terms of select categories. Another thing I want to talk about in terms of the retail landscape in Canada is as you come into this marketplace, understand that it might be easy for you to launch, you know, your product into Costco. So let's say, you know, Costco is really interested in Bow and Arrow's cornmeal. If you go to Costco first and you bypass Loblaws and you try to go into Loblaws after you've developed your brand at Costco, it could be a big challenge. And a reason for that is Costco has very different margin expectations. And in Canada, they're looking for about a 15% margin on your product. Costco is also looking for a 30% slope though in relation to retail. So if you launch at Costco and you set your price, Loblaws is going to be challenging you to say, hey, I saw your product at Costco, because they're going to know, they all watch each other. Loblaws, Walmart, and Costco are in fierce competition here in this market. I don't know if you know this, but the Ontario market in Canada is probably one of the most fiercest competitive grocery retail markets in the world. And, you know, they really are watching what every other is doing and what each of them is listing in terms of products. So, you know, going into Walmart where price is probably the most important thing, and then trying to launch in a grocery, which has a different margin expectation, it's going to be really important that you understand where do you want to go first. And there's a specific way to approach these three players, and what it typically entails is likely going to Loblaws first, and after you've come from the independent channel, launching your brand at Loblaws, establishing it there, and then looking at Costco, and then possibly a couple years down the road looking at Walmart. So those would be some of the recommendations for the most part that I would share with you on this slide. Okay. All right, so now we're getting into some of the mechanics. So the most important thing, and I mentioned earlier, I think it's one of the features that many of your brands have, is the unique selling proposition. So having a strong USP is a key requirement here in Canada as you're looking to build your brand. Brands that have a strong unique selling proposition usually check off most or all of the boxes down below. So where the retailer here in Canada is looking is they want to find a brand that's on or ahead of trend, has a superior taste to what's offered in the market, or it has clean ingredients on the label, low in sugar. So sugar vilification is a big deal here in Canada. Recently, Health Canada issued its food guide, and for the first time ever, they removed juice from that guide. The guide used to recommend, a daily, I think it was half a cup of, juice as part of a whole diet. And just because juice has so much sugar, last year they took it off the list, and it caused a big kerfluffle. So Health Canada here in Canada has a big influence over what people eat in terms of the government, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency compared to the FDA are, I would call it, very strict, and understanding that there's different guidelines from the regulatory side. And I think on previous presentations, you probably heard that difference. It's something really important to think about. But non-GMO really resonates in this market, as well as organic. And where it's becoming increasingly important is brands that are really pushing in terms of their packaging, in terms of the ingredients, and in terms of the footprint that they're leaving environmentally, get high marks for sustainability, as well as social responsibility. So companies that are giving back to communities, that are putting aside money for the planet, for the environment, those are really important unique selling propositions that you could pursue. I think for many of the brands on the call, I think you've probably nailed a lot of this in terms of your product offerings. And the key thing for me though, and I think that would do really well, whether it's Tonka or Herbal Lodge or Red Lake or Bow and Arrow, is the story. And I think you've got, each of you on the call here, depending on how you put the story together, I think you've got some very compelling messaging that I think the retailers would be very interested in here in Canada. The reason for this is that shelf space is at a very high premium. Retailers are really, really selective. So if you're coming in with a Me Too product, so let's say you're a bar and you're a fruit and nut bar, it would be really difficult now that we've got mega players in the category already offering, for example, Kind Bar with fruit and nuts. There's probably another 4 or 5 brands that are on the shelf that are fruit and nut based. It'll be really challenging for you to get space in lieu of these other brands. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that these brands, if they're delisted, the retailer has to make sure they're going to make up for that lost volume. And by checking those boxes above, there's no guarantees, but it does give the retailer a lot of confidence that what he or she is taking off of the shelf is going to be replaced with your brand that he or she believes is going to deliver greater incremental sales than what was delisted. So having a strong unique selling proposition also allows you the opportunity to leverage your negotiating power. So when I say that, I'm talking about getting your distributor partners to give you a more favorable distribution margin that they're going to apply to your product. It could be working with a retailer that's normally looking for a 40% margin, who's willing to drop it to 30 or 35 understanding that you have to work with foreign exchange and whatnot as a small company coming into the market, that the chances of you being able to negotiate that are higher if you have if they really want your product. And it also allows you to, I think, also get better commission rates from your broker partners, because if you've got a hot brand, they're really going to be looking at it as an opportunity for them to elevate their own company within the retailer's mind, because they're carrying your brand. And it could be Lakota as an opportunity. It's such a different popcorn than the others in the marketplace, that they're willing to take a 4% commission versus a 5%. And also it allows you the opportunity to negotiate potentially with your distributor that they'll kick in funding for your promotion. So let's say you've got a 15% deal in play. The distributor, depending on their opinion of your brand, might be able to kick in 5 or 10% to add to that promotion. So you'll get an even bigger, better promotion out of the the retailer. So what I would really strongly recommend is, if you're coming into this marketplace and you're competing solely on price, the local brands will more than likely be able to beat you in terms of being able to hit those price points, because they have the advantage of being local, but they also don't have to deal with foreign exchange rates, which many of you will have to consider as you're looking to come into the market. Some might have duties depending on it's not NAFTA anymore. MC, US UMAC, I think is what it's called, is the new the new trade agreement. So some companies might have to deal with duties, whereas locals don't. And then in Quebec, which is a big province for us population-wise as well as within the industry, they're very protective in Quebec of their own brands. So it's going to be a really tough battle if you're coming in just on price. And I think ultimately what's happening is our retailers know, if they really find your product proposition compelling, that consumers that shop their stores are going to be more than willing to pay a premium for your unique product. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about distributors here in Canada. Some you're going to recognize, others you may not know. So let me just tell you, there's many distributors in Canada, but the three biggest in Canada for natural products would be UNFI. So again, very similar to the US. Tree of Life, which you may not know, is KeHE, as well as Horizon, which is a Western-based company that just recently went national. So these are three of the top national distributors in the market. There are many other smaller distributors that tend to be regionally specific. So in Ontario, you might be dealing with another 5 distributors that service just the Ontario market, and in the Quebec market and in the BC market. But I just wanted to sort of highlight the top ones. But having a very well thought through distributor strategy is important. So one of the things you're going to want to consider is, do I go with several distributors, which has its challenges in having to manage these different distributors, but it also has its benefits in that you might be able to get a little bit more competitive pricing out of each of them if they're competing in the same market? Or do I go with an exclusive partner and go with one distributor? The benefits of going exclusive is that if you've got a very strong, unique selling proposition, as we talked about earlier, that distributor could really focus on your brand and help you establish a retail price point in the market. Some distributors I know will be flexible on the margin that they're looking for in the category. So you might get a favorable margin, but you also might get them to give you a favorable peg rate on the exchange. So right now our exchange, US to Canada, $1 US in Canada is worth 1.42 cents, so $1.42. It's typically not that high, and I think just with the way the world's gone, it's gotten exponentially higher. But on average, you're looking at about a 1.3 difference. So distributors, if it's 1.3, will peg the rate at probably about 1.37. So your ability to try to keep it as close to 1.3 would be very beneficial. And companies that invest in a comprehensive go-to-market plan, I think, have a strong advantage over companies that don't. And what it does is it just gives you as an entrepreneur a much better understanding of the landscape here and what your potential for the brand is that'll allow you to communicate that to your distributor partner or your retail partner. And it allows you to, I think, get a head start in terms of speed to market. So the stronger the USP, the more leverage that you have going forward in terms of working with your distributor partner. Okay, brokers. So I've been asked this many times, you know, why do we need a broker and a distributor? Well, the fact of the matter is the distributors in Canada, I'll give you an example, UNFI, they work with 900 brands. So getting focus in that environment is really difficult. The distributors do have sales reps, they do have key account managers, they do have business insights folks that can help you work with the distribution numbers. So their sales reporting, as an example, is going to be really important for you as you're developing your brand. But trying to get a focus within those 900 brands could be difficult. So we do have brokers. We've got brokers of varying sizes all across the country. The distributor makes their money on the margin that they charge on your product. So you're not paying them per se, but they're buying, taking title of the product, and then they're reselling it. The broker makes their money on commissions here in Canada, I think very similar to the US, but your broker really gives you a lot of focus. So having that broker partner, and hopefully, you know, you're going to go with one that, number one, is willing to pioneer your brand. So take it from zero to hero over the next, 12, 18, 24 months. But it allows you the opportunity to work within a team that you hopefully they don't have too many brands. And it gives you that focus. Some of the big players here in Canada would include Marsham Natural Specialty Sales, which I think is a player in the US as well. We've got in Canada Indigo, and then we've also got Loblaws Excel. But like I said, there are many other smaller distributors that are really good, and some of them are more focused regionally than they are nationally. But brokers really, they're providing you with strong head office representation. So relationships, really important. The ability to execute your brand plan, as well as leverage negotiations around listings, getting you the best distributor costs, as well as promotional costs. But importantly, with brokers, they give you coverage at store level that's focused on your brand. So we call it feet on the street, which I think might be very similar to the US. They've also they've got teams, many of them, the bigger ones, that are business insights teams that will analyze the distributor reports as well as Nielsen data and offer you some category management expertise. So the final point on this slide for me is really around forming strong partnerships in Canada with your distributor partners as well as your broker partners, but treating each of them, actually not just the broker, but treating their people as an extension of your own team and your own sales force, I think is really, really important. So let's look at common retail practices. So, talking about strategy around pitching to retailers. So again, some of this is probably very similar to what you're seeing in the US, but be prepared. That's the biggest thing I can offer you. Understand the market, understand your category in Canada, understand who your competitors are, when are the category review dates, so going into the meeting, being prepared. Finding out through your partners as much as you can about the buyer needs. So if you're going into Loblaws and you're coming in and you've got a snack, let's say it's Lakota going in, understand where they are in terms of their popcorn category and what are some of the holes in the assortment on shelf. Is there a way that you can make a difference, and what's the role of your brand going in? So leverage your unique selling proposition, identify what the gap is and what your role of your brand is. And buyers really love the story behind your brand. So I think being really pinpointed in terms of how your story plays out, in terms of what makes you different from the other brands in the category, is really important. Ensuring your costing is going to deliver on their margin requirements. So if you're coming into the category, know that in snacks, the margins are going to be 35%. But if you're coming into frozen, which is a more expensive category for the retailer to maintain, it could be 40%. Typically, it's between 30 to 40. Provide the funds to support your brand around promotion. So we'll talk about this in the next slide, but it's around your promotional support. So if you come in, make sure that you're doing at least quarterly promotions on your product. Lay out your marketing support. That's really important. So if you've got a great product that's got an amazing taste profile, well, make sure you're demoing it. Do the digital marketing and social media that really does talk to the Canadian consumer as well. I think that's something that, a lot of companies rely on a North America strategy. I think if you've got a social media campaign that Canadians are going to notice right away, like is it just a US knockoff, or is it really targeted towards the Canadian consumer? I think, having that strategy and being able to support your brand is going to be important. And, be prepared to negotiate those listing fees or slotting fees. So a lot of retailers are adamant, it's this amount or nothing. But I always think it's good to go in, if you're coming in with, let's say you're coming in with 4 SKUs, try and negotiate all 4 for a reduced rate. And I think it's not going to hurt asking. And I think ultimately, you're going to want to save as much as you can on listing fees, so that you can put it back into marketing to help drive the consumer to your brand in terms of awareness. And then the last point on this slide is really following up. And all of us are really busy. The retailers are super busy. But I think those that persevere and, follow up with your distributor, follow up with your broker, recap every meeting that you have with next steps at the very top, and just, not to the point where you're going to want the retailers are not going to answer the phone, or, your partners are not going to want to answer the phone and say, oh no, it's Herbal Lodge again calling. But I think it's really important that you follow up, especially when you're dealing with your partners in the market. Okay, so next couple of slides are talking to more specifics around retailer practices. So on this slide, it's about trade spend and promotion. So I'm just going to give you some guidelines. So retailers in Canada really expect you to support your brand with promotional funds. The funds can be anywhere from 5% of your gross sales to 15%. I would say on average, it's about 10%. Many companies, though, in their first year, overinvest on the trade marketing, because regular marketing is so expensive that you're going to want to make sure that you get out to as many people as you can. And some companies will spend up to 20-25%, especially in the first year. And promotions are around in-store features, flyers, displays that are funded through what we call MCBs. And I'm not sure if it's the same in the US. Those are manufacturer chargebacks. And note here that those MCBs are calculated, and many of you, I think, would go through a distributor as you first come into the marketplace, because your volumes may not justify getting a warehouse slot. So if you are doing that route, MCBs will be calculated on the landed cost into the retailer, not on your cost into, let's say, the distributor. It's on the cost that distributor is paying, or that retailer is paying through the distributor. In terms of margins, we talked a little bit about this on the last slides, but expect 30%, but it does go up to 50%, depending on the category. So if you're going in with fresh product, for example, blueberries, if you're coming into the market with blueberries, sometimes the shrink on blueberries could be pretty high. So retailers will jack up their margin to offset that shrink, and it could be as high as 50%. Distributors book margins range from about 25% for dry goods to about 33% for frozen. Those, I think, each of you should know, and I'll share it with you, is that that's just their book price. So, I would come prepared to negotiate down. We talked about the FX rate. Understanding the catalog price of your products. I'm surprised at how many companies come into Canada and they don't really get into the nitty-gritty on what the distributor is selling the product for in the catalog, and then working back to figure out what margin is that distributor taking. So I would watch every nickel and dime as it goes through in that first year, because chances are you're not going to get a return on investment fully in the first year. Maybe it pays out sooner than 12 months, but know that it's a big investment launching in a whole new country. It's not like simply going into a different region. And know that chains versus independents, you should be within about a 15% difference on your selling price. Meaning, if you're at $5.99 at Loblaw on your product, or let's use a different number, $3.99 on your product at Loblaw, and you're $7.99 at the independent channel, that's not going to work, because the independents won't support your brand if there's too much of a price gap. But if you are within a 15% difference, the chains are typically going to be 15% cheaper at what they sell to the retail to the consumer. I think that's that's a good range. And accounts, know that chain accounts are really protective of the retails. And an example is that at Loblaw, you're not even allowed to talk about retail pricing. And they don't want to talk about it. It has a lot to do with the sort of price fixing situation that was had between the retailers several years ago on bread. And they were charged with some of them were fined for colluding on price, and therefore several of those retailers won't even talk to you about retail prices, and it's all up to the retailer as to what they're going to retail your product for. Okay, so we're winding down here, last couple of slides. So listing fees, we talked a little bit about. Many retailers will require listing fees. Conventional listings, so this is not natural, but conventional listings can be as high as 400,000 Canadian a SKU, which I think many on the call would be like gasping like I do about that number. But the natural channel is a lot more affordable. So the highest would be Loblaw at $15,000 a SKU. But know that many of the accounts here in Canada, especially across the independents, work with free goods, which I think is reasonable. What I would typically do is, if you have an A account on the indie side, I'd give them a free case. But know that a free case is roughly $30 a case. So if your case cost is $60, you're going to want to negotiate maybe not a full free case, but half a case. B accounts typically 50% and C accounts 25%. So your goal is really to scale your fees to the store count. So if it's a high of 15,000 for 400 stores, I would really recommend that you negotiate. If you get 200 stores, you're only going to pay half of that. And really work with your sales team, scorecard, make sure that they're scorecarding against your distribution, so that they've got an eye on where you are in terms of your new product launch. And like I mentioned earlier, all companies want that return on investment as quickly as they can. For many companies, though, the payout happens after year one. Okay, so just to finish off, I hope I've been able to share with you that Canada is a great market. Excited that you're thinking about coming into this country with your great products. We have, I think, a robust market, a well-developed but yet still growing in double-digit health and wellness sector. And I think there's significant opportunities for many of your brands here. Again, highly concentrated market. Make sure you plan. Make sure you have a good go-to-market as you come into the country. And I just welcome the chance, to discuss anytime any one of you have any questions. You can feel free to reach out to me to talk about your products. And last page is just a little contact information to be able to get a hold of me if you need to. So that was it on my part, Courtney.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. We can go ahead and transition to taking questions.
Sure.
Hi, Robert. This is Naveen from FAS. Just a quick question. You mentioned briefly about the financial investment that companies need to keep in mind when entering new markets, and then their go-to marketing strategy for entering foreign markets. Based on your experience and knowledge, is there an average, an estimate of how much you think companies should put aside for this type of strategy, just to be prepared for what they need to invest financially and to get into new markets, specifically for the Canadian market?
Sure, that's a great question. From a cost standpoint, the way I would break it down as simply as I can, and again, this is just an estimate. is if you're looking to come into Canada and it's a small launch, let's say you're coming in with 3 SKUs, so 3 products, you're looking regionally. So you want to maybe come into the Ontario market to start, or you want to go into the British Columbia market. So as a regional launch and you're targeting select non-chain accounts, so the independents, I would say that the costs will be in the tens of thousands. I would say that's probably an average. So, you know, I think there's opportunities for companies to get funding through USDA programs, and I'm pretty sure everyone, you've already taken the team through what some of those could look like. You know, but you've got a 40% stronger dollar right now. So, you know, when I'm saying tens of thousands, I'm talking tens of thousands Canadian. You know, some of the money that you're going to need to spend, I would spend around research, on your go-to-market plan, on your labeling, your first production run, your logistics fees, you know, commissions, trade promotion, and whatnot. So from a small launch perspective, it's in the tens of thousands. If it's medium, so you're looking at, you know, multiple regions, you're looking at more SKUs, you're looking at maybe some of the chains that you want to get into, I would say it's in the hundreds of thousands Canadian. And then if you're looking at large, I mean, it gets into the millions on the large side, or closer to $1 million. So I think that would probably be the easiest way that I could explain it without really kind of understanding more specifics around, you know, the company and the products and whatnot.
Great, thank you so much, Robert. We have one question from Julie, and she asked, what is a typical brokerage fee? What is the percent?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So typically it's about 5%. And I think as you grow your business, you definitely can negotiate a lesser amount. And that might be something that you might want to negotiate at the beginning. So let's say you're coming in and, you know, you're working with a team that'll take your brand on, and they're going to pioneer your brand. Some of them might ask for a small retainer per month to offset the lack of sales, because it's going to take several months before you start getting sales coming through. But I would say typically 5% is where the industry is right now.
Great, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions, but we can give it just a few more seconds. If you do have any questions, you could submit that in the Q&A box.
Sure.
Or raise your hand.
I have another question, Robert, until maybe we get more questions. Do you recommend small to medium companies to focus on a region within Canada when they start their export, marketing strategy, or do you think that it's still wise to go nationwide?
Yeah, I would say, like, if you focus in on Ontario, like Toronto, we call it the Greater Toronto Area, like the GTA. That's probably your biggest bang for the buck in terms of marketing. You know, if I was a company coming in, I would want to get into the Greater Toronto Area for sure. I think initially I'd probably skip Quebec for most brands. And then I would think about Vancouver area. So the Greater Metro Vancouver area. So I would definitely pinpoint my marketing into, you know, the areas where, number one, my product's distributed. So you definitely want the distribution before you market. But then where you can also get the most eyeballs on what it is you're doing. So it'd be Toronto and Vancouver, I think, for sure would be the focus area for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Still not seeing any additional questions, but I really appreciate everyone taking their time to join us today. We're so sorry about the hiccup from last week, and I'm glad you guys were again able to participate today. If you do have any questions, Robert's contact information is there, or you could reach out to Naveen, Courtney, or myself. We'd be happy to get you in touch with whoever it is you're trying to get in touch with.
Great.
But yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody. You all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.